My name is Margaret Lane. I'm 52 years old. And 1 week ago, everything I built vanished with a single keystroke. I'd worked at Barrow and Brightman Financial for 9 years, the last 6 as a senior analyst. My office wasn't fancy, but it had a door and a window. Small luxuries in a building where most folks sat elbow to elbow under flickering fluorescent lights. I liked my quiet. I liked my spreadsheets, my tidy reports. The way numbers told truths people didn't always want to say out loud. And I took pride in what I'd done. I just wrapped the biggest financial forecast of my career. 226 pages of data, strategy, and long-range modeling. Nearly a year of my life. Late nights, missed dinners, forgotten birthdays. All of it stored in a file I called Margaret 2025 Masterfinal.xlsx. Until yesterday. Margaret, can you come in for a moment? My supervisor, Glenn, waved me into his glass-walled office, barely looking up from his phone. I stepped in with that familiar twinge in my stomach. Glenn only called me in when he needed something, or when something had gone wrong. I looked over your projections, he said, shutting the door behind me. I deleted the file. I blinked. Excuse me? I deleted it. You'll need to start over. We're pivoting. The board wants a new direction. I'm going to need something cleaner, less conservative. I stared at him, words forming and vanishing in my mouth. That file had the entire year's. I know, but we're moving forward. Start fresh. He smiled, the kind of smile you give a stranger's child at the grocery store. Polite, indifferent. This is the job. No apology, no warning, just gone. I walked out of his office, numb. My hand shook on the mouse as I opened the shared drive. The file was gone. My backups, too. Systematically wiped. Glenn had meant it. By lunchtime, I had locked myself in the restroom. I cried silently into a paper towel, my body heaving as I pressed my face against the cool tile wall. I didn't care if someone heard. I'd poured everything into that project. It was supposed to be my legacy, the reason they'd promote me, finally, after years of watching younger men get the jobs I trained them for. And now, start fresh. I took the rest of the day off. Nobody stopped me. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table nursing cold tea, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up. Hello? Margaret Lane? The voice was male, calm, and deliberate. Yes? This is Nathaniel Chen. I'm with Whitestone Strategies. We've reviewed some of your work, and I think we need to talk. I sat up. Whitestone was one of our top competitors, quiet, efficient, and highly aggressive. No one left Barrow and Brightman for Whitestone, not unless they wanted trouble. I think you have the wrong person. I don't, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. We're aware of the project you were working on, or rather, the one Glenn Haverford just deleted. I froze. He knew. You may not know this, Nathaniel continued, but Glenn's brother-in-law sits on our advisory board. Information travels, and frankly, I'm stunned they erased it. From what we've seen, your model could have restructured the entire mid-cap investment division. I couldn't speak. We'd like to offer you dinner tomorrow, somewhere quiet. No commitments, just a conversation. When I hung up, I sat in silence. My hands trembled again, not from fear this time, but from something else. A flicker of possibility, a door creaking open, but also danger. The next morning, I arrived at work and found my office door locked. My badge wouldn't scan. I stood there, blinking at the red light on the reader, when Sheila from HR appeared. Margaret, could you come with me? We sat in a windowless room with a single folder between us. Due to an internal restructuring, Sheila said, not meeting my eyes, we're making some staffing adjustments. Your position has been affected. Affected? You'll receive a severance package. She slid the folder across the table. We wish you the best. No warning. No exit interview. Just out. I didn't say a word. I stood, walked out with the folder clutched to my chest, and drove home in silence. By the time I reached my driveway, I was shaking with rage. I'd given them everything, and they'd erased me. But that wasn't the worst part. That afternoon, I got another call, this time from Rose, a junior analyst who'd worked under me. Margaret, she whispered, they're using your model. They renamed it, stripped your name off everything, but it's yours. I saw the structure. I saw the formulas. It's yours. I felt the blood drain from my face. They're presenting it to the board next week, she added. I thought you should know. I hung up and stared at the wall. My stomach twisted into knots. They hadn't just fired me. They'd stolen my work. And they were going to profit from it. I opened the envelope Sheila gave. Nathaniel met me at a quiet Italian bistro, tucked behind a row of hedge-trimmed shops. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, but there was something old in his eyes, calculated, patient. Margaret, he said, rising to shake my hand. Thank you for coming. I nodded, still unsure if this was courage or foolishness. You said you'd seen my work? He leaned back as the waiter poured water into tall stemmed glasses. We got our hands on an early version of your forecast. What you did with debt ratio modeling? Brilliant. You found patterns our team missed. You anticipated the downturn. I blinked. That model took months. Nathaniel's voice softened. We know. And now they're using it without credit. He let the words hang in the air like smoke. I hadn't told him that. And yet he knew. It made my skin prickle. So what do you want from me? I asked. We want you to join us. Help us design something stronger, better. We believe Barrow and Brightman is vulnerable. Your work proved that. I swallowed hard. Are you asking me to betray them? Nathaniel shook his head. You owe them nothing. They erased your name, stole your work, and locked the door behind you. That's not loyalty. That's exploitation. His words hit a nerve. And if I say yes, you'll work from our downtown office, full autonomy, your own team, and you'll oversee a new initiative, one with your name on it. It sounded like a dream, a dangerous one. I need time, I said. Of course. As I left, I caught my reflection in the glass, a woman trying to hold her pieces together. My gray roots were showing. My eyes looked tired. But somewhere behind them, a fire was flickering back to life. Over the next few days, I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about Glenn, about how quickly I'd been discarded. But I also thought about the people I'd mentored, the interns who used to leave notes on my desk. Rose came by one afternoon, under the pretense of returning a scarf I'd left. She closed the door gently behind her. They think you're gone for good. I raised an eyebrow. Aren't I? They're talking about promoting Jeremy. Jeremy? I nearly choked. He's been here 18 months. Rose looked pained. He's presenting your model, as if it's his. I stared at her, my voice low. Why are you telling me this? Because I watched you stay late every night for a year, because you taught me everything I know, and because I'm tired of watching men like Glenn erase women like you. I felt my throat tighten. "I can't stop them," she said, "but maybe you can." That night, I opened my laptop and looked through my personal backups. They'd wiped the shared drives, but I'd kept early versions at home. Nothing recent, but enough to prove authorship. I clicked through tabs and timestamps, dates and formulas with my initials. The deeper I went, the angrier I became. This wasn't just theft. This was war. I met Nathaniel again, this time in a sleek, glass-walled conference room at Whitestone. He slid a contract across the table, full creative control, 6-figure salary, and your name on every deliverable. I signed. The first few weeks were a whirlwind. My new team, Jamal, Priya, Anna, were bright, young, hungry. They listened. They challenged me. They respected me. We called our initiative Project Harp, inspired by the verse my mother loved. Praise the Lord with the harp. Make music to him on the 10-stringed lyre. Psalm 33:2. It wasn't just business. It was personal. It was justice. One evening, I stayed late polishing a presentation when Nathaniel stopped by with coffee. "You're changing things, you know," he said. I gave a tired smile. "I just want the truth to come out." He paused. "What if it already has?" He handed me a manila envelope. Inside were copies of Barrow and Brightman internal memos, emails, meeting transcripts. At the top, one line made my blood run cold. "Use Margaret's model. Don't credit her. She's disposable." It was signed by Glenn. My hand shook as I closed the folder. "I want the board to see this," I said. "You will." Word spread fast. An expose hit the investment forums first. Anonymous, but detailed. Screenshots, comparisons, stolen work. It was clear. Barrow and Brightman panicked. Within a week, the SEC launched an internal inquiry. Glenn was placed on leave. Jeremy's promotion was revoked. Rose texted me, "You did it. You shook the whole building." But it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my voice. I didn't return their calls. Not Glenn's, not HR's, not even the legal team offering to clarify the misunderstanding. Instead, I kept building. Project Harp gained traction. Clients trusted it. And slowly, my name started showing up in articles, headlines. Margaret Lane, the woman who caught the system sleeping. People called me brave. But the truth? I was just tired of being quiet. One Friday, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, old-fashioned. It was from Glenn's wife. "I don't know what he did, but I believe you. I watched him come home one night with your report, laughing about how easy it was. I wanted to say something then, but I didn't. I'm sorry." I read it twice, then set it down. Forgiveness was hard, but I wasn't going to carry him anymore. Every Sunday now, I go to a little chapel on the edge of town. No fanfare, no sermon lights, just wood, song, and silence. One morning, I stood during the hymn and felt something crack open in me. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. Psalm 113:7. That was me, lifted, not by luck, but by truth, and by fire. The first real test came in the form of a subpoena. I was standing in the hallway of Whitestone, sipping bad coffee from the vending machine, when security called me down. A man in a gray suit stood waiting near the lobby. "Margaret Lane?" he asked, expression unreadable. "Yes." He handed me an envelope. "You've been formally subpoenaed. Barrow and Brightman is suing for breach of intellectual property. I didn't speak." I simply nodded, took the envelope, and walked back upstairs as if my legs weren't about to give out. Back at my desk, Nathaniel sat calmly as I dropped the envelope in front of him. "They're trying to bury me," I said, my voice tight. He opened the packet, skimmed the pages, then leaned back. "They're bluffing. I still have to defend myself. You won't be alone." He was right. Whitestone's legal team mobilized quickly. We prepared everything: timestamps, emails, Rose's affidavit, even Glenn's signed memo. Still, something about it made me feel small again, like I was back in high school being called to the principal's office. "Let them come," Anna said one evening. "They don't know what they're up against." But I did. I knew what it felt like to be erased by people who smiled to your face and swept your name off the table as soon as you walked away. I prayed more during those weeks than I had in years, not for vengeance, for strength, and for peace. Then came the bombshell. Rose called me in tears. "They're offering me a promotion, but only if I retract my statement. They said if I don't, I'll be transferred to a satellite branch." My heart dropped. "Rose, I don't want to lose my job, Margaret." I closed my eyes. "You don't owe me anything." She sobbed softly. "Yes, I do, but I'm scared." I understand. I meant it. I remembered what fear felt like, how heavy silence could be. 2 days later, I received notice that Rose had amended her testimony, and the case shifted. Suddenly, it was just my word against theirs. Nathaniel and I sat in a quiet room reviewing deposition notes. He tapped a section with his pen. "Even without Rose, we have proof of authorship." But they're playing dirty. They're leaking stories, making it look like you stole from them. I rubbed my temples. "How do they sleep at night?" Nathaniel looked at me, his voice quiet. "Margaret, you've got to decide. Is this about clearing your name or taking theirs down?" I stared at the wall. The question hit deep. Was I here to punish them or to reclaim myself? The day of the hearing, I wore my mother's navy dress, the one she wore when she sang at church. She always said blue made her feel strong. I stood before the panel, hands steady, voice clear. Yes, I created the model. I have drafts, notes, emails confirming my authorship. And I have motive: survival. One of the board members raised an eyebrow. "Survival." I nodded. In that company, women over 50 weren't promoted. We were tolerated until we weren't. Silence, then a murmur. They continued. "They didn't just delete a file. They tried to erase my existence. But I kept proof. Not out of spite, out of necessity." I paused. "Because I've spent a lifetime watching men take credit for women's work. And I decided, not this time." My words landed. I saw it in their eyes. 2 weeks later, the ruling came in. Barrow and Brightman's lawsuit was dismissed. Their countersuit was rejected, and the panel acknowledged me as the original creator of the financial model. They were forced to publish a formal retraction. The day it went live, I stood outside with Nathaniel in the cold sun. "You did it," he said. "No," I whispered. "God did." He looked at me, curious. "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord," I said. Romans 12:19, he smiled. "Remind me never to cross you." But the real victory wasn't legal. It came a month later when Rose showed up at my door. She looked thinner, worn. Her eyes welled up the moment I opened the door. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't say anything, just pulled her into a hug. "They transferred me anyway," she said, after I changed my statement. I nodded. "That's how they work." She handed me a USB drive. "This has everything: screenshots, internal messages, timestamps. It's all yours." I held it gently. Why now? Because I saw what they did to you. And I realized if I don't speak the truth, they'll do it to me next. We didn't release the contents. We didn't need to. Barrow and Brightman was already unraveling. Investors pulled out, executives resigned, and Glenn disappeared from public view. I never saw him again, but I forgave him anyway. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's deciding to stop bleeding from a wound that someone else inflicted. Project HARP went global within the year. And when they asked me to speak at the Women in Finance Summit, I wore the same navy dress. I stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces. I'm Margaret Lane. I was 52 when I got fired, 53 when I got justice, and 54 when I realized. I paused, smiling softly. The world only erases you if you let it. 3 months after the ruling, things should have calmed down. But they didn't. Not entirely. Success, I learned, comes with a price. We were preparing for the biggest pitch of my life. A $40 million portfolio shift for a client with international reach. Everything we'd worked for was riding on this presentation. But with only 12 days to go, I got a phone call that stopped everything. "Ms. Lane," said a voice I didn't recognize. "This is Dr. Vera Marcus from Riverbend Assisted Living." My chest tightened. Is it my mother? I'm afraid she suffered a fall this morning. She's stable, but we believe she may not recognize you. You should come. I left everything. Spreadsheets, timelines, the mock-up board for Project HARP's global dashboard, and drove 3 hours north in silence. My mother had always been strong, even when my father died, even when she sold the house we grew up in to move into care. But when I stepped into her room and saw her small and still, the air knocked out of me. She blinked when I walked in. "Margaret," she said, voice dry and confused. "Is that you, honey?" I smiled through the tears. "Yes, Mama, I'm here." For a moment, she smiled. Then her face clouded. "Number, that's not right. Margaret's. She's gone to work." I reached for her hand. "I'm home now." Her eyes flickered with recognition, but it didn't last. I stayed overnight, watched her sleep, prayed. Back at Whitestone, Nathaniel took charge. "We'll move the pitch if we have to," he said, but I shook my head. "Number, we finish it. We owe it to the team, to what we've built." The days blurred, hospital by morning, conference room by night. I was running on fumes, and yet, for the first time, I didn't feel alone. Jamal would leave notes on my desk. "Breathe. We've got this." Anna dropped off food. "No more vending machine coffee." And Priya added Psalm 23 to our slide deck as a personal touch. A nod to the spiritual strength behind the numbers. Though I walk through the valley, yes, I was walking through it. Then came the second blow. 3 days before the pitch, Whitestone's system was hacked, files corrupted, slides gone, backup drives scrambled. "Sabotage?" I asked. Nathaniel's jaw was tight. "We're investigating, but someone knew what they were looking for." I stood in the darkened boardroom, eyes closed, fists clenched. "Start over," I whispered. Again. From scratch. Again. But this time, I wasn't alone. We rebuilt in 48 hours. Everyone pitched in. Jamal even slept in the office. We didn't just rebuild the presentation. We refined it, sharpened it, strengthened it. By the time we entered the pitch room, we were exhausted, but unshakable. I stood before the clients, every line of code and calculation engraved in my memory. "I'm Margaret Lane," I began, And what you're about to see isn't just a model, it's a declaration. That integrity builds resilience. We finished to silence, then applause, then a handshake. We got the deal. 40 million. Secured. That night, I returned to the hospital. My mother was sleeping, her hands folded neatly on the blanket. A Bible rested by her side. I sat beside her and opened it to Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. I didn't read it out loud, but I think she heard it anyway. The news came on a Thursday. I was sipping tea in the break room when Nathaniel rushed in, his face pale. "Margaret," he said, barely catching his breath. "You need to see this." He handed me his tablet. On the screen was a press release from Barrow and Brightman, former analyst under investigation for data theft. My name was in the headline, not Glenn's. Mine. I froze. "They're accusing me?" My voice cracked. "Now?" Nathaniel nodded slowly. "They filed a formal complaint this morning with the regulatory board. They're claiming you stole proprietary data when you left. But the court already ruled. It doesn't matter. They found a new angle. They're saying you used internal drafts from their servers, not personal copies." I felt like I'd been punched. "They're coming for my license?" I whispered. Nathaniel didn't answer. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room, lights off, staring at the ceiling. My mother's Bible lay on my lap, unopened. This was different. This wasn't about clearing my name. This was about survival. If I lost my license, it would be over. Everything I'd built, everything I'd reclaimed. Gone. I called Rose. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. By the third call, I left a voicemail. "They're trying to destroy me. Please. If you have anything else, I need it." I hung up, heart racing, and waited. At 2:37 a.m., she called back. Her voice was quiet. "There's something I never told you." I held my breath. When they made me retract the statement, they offered me Glenn's job. I closed my eyes. I didn't take it, but I accepted the offer long enough to access his archive. I downloaded everything just in case. My breath caught. "Rose, I shouldn't have waited. I was afraid, but this is too far." She sent me a link. Inside were over 300 files, memos, drafts, deleted emails, including one labeled Margaret Story Model, Internal Nanny Copy Edit.xlsx. I opened it. It was mine. But the metadata showed Glenn had duplicated it from my personal draft weeks before he deleted it. He'd copied me, then accused me of stealing it back. We brought it to the legal team. They moved fast. The data trail was undeniable. 2 days later, Barrow and Brightman withdrew the complaint. But the damage had been done. The story had already spread. Blogs, forums, even some news outlets. My face, my name, my integrity, all questioned. I sat with Nathaniel, staring at a draft statement on the screen. "We can fight back," he said. "Issue a counter-release. Sue again. Go public." I stared at the words, then shook my head. "No? Why not?" "Because I'm done fighting shadows." He looked confused. "I want the work to speak for itself," I said. "Let them throw mud. I'm building something clean." But deep down, it hurt. Not the lies, the silence. The realization that I could be right and still attacked. That integrity wasn't always enough. That truth doesn't always win in the headlines, only in the heart. Sunday came. I walked into the chapel early, lit a candle for my father, then one for my mother, and then one for Glenn. Yes, even for him. Because my mother once said something I'd never forgotten. If you only pray for the people who love you, how will your heart ever grow? After the service, I sat quietly, alone. An elderly woman with silver hair touched my shoulder. "I've been following your story," she said. "My daughter went through something similar. They made her feel small." I looked at her. "But you stood," she whispered. "You didn't fold." My throat tightened. "You gave us all a little more courage." That was the moment. Not a lawsuit, not a headline. That was the turning point. Because I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every woman who'd been erased, to every man who'd been told he was too old, too honest, too human, and to every heart that still believed truth has a voice. And it was finally speaking. The fallout came slowly. First, my inbox flooded. Some messages were kind, others not. "You should have stayed quiet. Stop playing the victim. Typical woman, wants credit for everything." I read them all. Then I deleted every single one. But the weight stayed, because no matter how strong you are, words cut when they come wrapped in bitterness. Nathaniel offered to hire a PR firm. "We can change the narrative." But I shook my head. "I don't want to sell a version of me. I want to live the truth of me." He hesitated. "You're stronger than most people." "No," I said. "I'm just tired of pretending I'm not breakable." At home, I started writing again. Not emails, not models, letters to myself. To the little girl who was always too quiet. To the woman who thought hard work alone would protect her. And to the stranger I saw in the mirror some days with tired eyes and fierce hope. Rose transferred out of Barrow and Brightman. She joined a mid-sized firm, sent me a card. "I'm not afraid anymore, thank you." I pinned it on my corkboard, next to my mother's favorite verse. "Blessed is she who believed the Lord would fulfill his promises to her." Anna got promoted. Jamal got recruited by an investment firm in Dubai. Priya started teaching financial literacy to underprivileged women in the city. We weren't just building numbers, we were building people, and that changed everything. Then came an invitation, a global investment conference, main stage. They wanted me to keynote. I hesitated, not because I wasn't ready, but because deep down I wondered, what more do I have to say? And then I remembered the chapel, the silver-haired woman, and the truth I kept learning. Sometimes survival is the story. And that was enough. I stood under the lights in a navy suit this time, tailored, firm, calm. "I'm Margaret Lane," I began, "and this is what happens when you erase a woman who remembers who she is." Silence, then a murmur, then a rising wave of applause. Backstage, Nathaniel waited. "You didn't mention Glenn," he noted. I smiled. "He's not the point." He nodded. "By the way," he added, pulling out his phone, "someone wants to meet you." He stepped aside. A girl, maybe 24, stood there. Nervous, eyes bright. "I'm Mara," she said. "Your story, it kept me from quitting last year." I took her hand. Then we both won. Later that night, I walked home alone. No driver, no fans, just me and the quiet. And I thought, this is what healing sounds like. No applause, no noise, just peace, just grace, just truth that no one can delete. 6 months passed. Project HARP expanded into 3 continents. My name was on reports, conferences, even a plaque outside the Whitestone Data Lab. But success didn't quiet everything, because something else was growing inside me. Restlessness. Not the kind that comes from ambition, The kind that comes when your heart whispers, "You've climbed the mountain." Now what? One morning, I stared at my calendar. Meetings, projections, travel, all of it full. But my spirit felt empty. So I called in sick and drove to the beach. Just me, a thermos of coffee, and a notebook. I sat on a bench and watched the tide roll in. For the first time in years, I did nothing, and it felt holy. That night, I journaled, "I've spent decades building wealth for others, but what am I building for myself?" I didn't have an answer, but I knew where to start looking. The next day, I walked into Nathaniel's office. "I want to scale back." He blinked. "You're the face of our expansion, Margaret." "I know, but I'm not meant to run forever." He leaned back. "So what will you do?" I smiled. "Teach." And that's how it began. A small group, 12 women, all over 40. Some divorced, some widowed, one still healing from bankruptcy. We met every Thursday. I taught them finance. They taught me grace. They asked hard questions like, "What do I do when my kids treat me like an ATM?" Or, "How do I rebuild at 58 when I was never allowed to make financial decisions?" Or, the one that hit me deepest, "Is it too late to start over?" I looked that woman in the eye and I said, "No, it's never too late when the seed is still alive." We named it Second Ledger, a place where women came to reclaim power over money, over shame, over silence. I watched them bloom. And in their blooming, I softened. One night, after class, one of them asked, "Do you ever miss it? The power?" I laughed. "I never had power," I said. "Just responsibility." She tilted her head. "And now," I thought for a moment, "now I have purpose." I started volunteering at the chapel. Not preaching, just listening. Some people needed help with budgets. Some just needed to cry. One man in his 60s asked if he was too late to matter. I sat beside him and whispered, "If you're still breathing, God's not finished with you." My mother passed quietly that winter. Her last words were, "Don't stop singing." I sang her favorite hymn at the funeral. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop because her faith had carried me through fire, and now it was my turn to carry others. Sometimes I still get invitations to speak on big stages. Sometimes I go. Sometimes I say no because I've learned you don't have to shout your story for it to echo. You just have to live it well. It started with a message I almost ignored, a plain envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, one line handwritten in ink. "I was wrong, and I can't fix it, but maybe you can." Signed, G.H. Glenn, Haverford. I stared at the letters like they were fire, then unfolded the second page. It was a list of names, accounts, transactions, bribes, people, things I didn't want to know, and yet things I already suspected. Barrow and Brightman hadn't just stolen ideas. They'd laundered numbers, misled investors, manipulated portfolios to inflate value, then cashed out quietly while retirees lost everything. This wasn't personal anymore. It was criminal, and I had proof. That night, I couldn't sleep. I watched the moon move across my bedroom wall. By morning, I had a choice. I could walk away, let it rot in the past, or I could act. I called Nathaniel. He met me at a diner with 2 coffees and a quiet stare. "I thought this was over," he said. So did I. I slid the pages across the table. He read in silence, then said only 2 words. "We publish." The fallout would be massive. Names would be exposed. Pensions would be audited. People would lose jobs, and some would go to prison. But the real question wasn't what would happen to them. It was. What would happen to me? I took the documents to the Financial Crimes Unit, gave my statement, handed them everything, walked out trembling, but upright, because I finally understood the cost of truth, and I was willing to pay it. In the meantime, I told the women of Second Ledger, people will call me vindictive, dramatic, ungrateful. One of them stood up and said, "Then let them call us all of that. We'll wear it like a crown." The news broke within 72 hours. Front pages, prime time, whistleblower, reveals deep corruption in financial giant. They used my name again, but this time it was right. Barrow and Brightman collapsed. Investigations widened, settlements began, but more importantly, some of the money came back to the pensions, to the schools, to the families who were left with dust. I didn't celebrate. I just lit another candle in the chapel and whispered, "Let justice roll like a river." The final call came on a rainy Wednesday. I was in the kitchen, boiling water for tea, when the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick up, but something told me to. "Margaret Lane?" the voice asked, careful, older. "Yes, this is William Chen. I'm Glenn's attorney." I waited. "He passed away this morning. Complications from a stroke? He left something for you." Silence. "He said you'd understand." The package arrived 2 days later. A weathered leather journal. Inside, Glenn's handwriting. Messy, hurried, confessional. He wrote about fear, regret, ambition, cowardice, and finally, shame. "I built my life on numbers, and when I started falling behind, I stole yours. I didn't think you'd fight back, but you did, and you were right." At the end, one line stopped me cold. "I never knew how to be the kind of man you already were, Margaret." I held the journal to my chest, not for him, but for what was lost in him. And I cried, not in bitterness, in release. A month later, I was invited to testify before the National Ethics Board. They wanted to hear how a whistleblower like me could still believe in the system. I stood in a formal suit, hair pulled back, hands steady, and said, "I don't believe in the system." A pause. "I believe in people. I believe in second chances, in courage that whispers when the room goes quiet, in women who speak even when they shake. And then, I believe in a God who sees what's done in the dark and calls it to light." There was no applause, just stillness, like truth had entered the room, and no one dared move. Afterward, a young man approached me. He looked barely 30, wide-eyed. "Ms. Lane," he said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What kept you going when everything tried to erase you?" I smiled. The knowledge that what they took from me wasn't mine to begin with. He frowned. "What do you mean?" "My name, my worth, my purpose. It never came from them." I touched his shoulder gently. "It came from the one who never forgets us." That night, I returned to the beach. Same bench, same tide. Only now, I wasn't alone. A few of the women from Second Ledger joined me. Well, they brought candles, each one for someone they had lost, each one for something they were reclaiming. We lit them in silence, and one whispered, "For the women who came before us." Another said, "And the ones who'll come after." And I added, "For the ones who were told to start over and started stronger." The wind picked up, the candles flickered, but they didn't go out. Not one. It's been 2 years. The world didn't end. But mine changed completely. I don't work in boardrooms anymore. I work in church basements, libraries, small offices above bakeries, where real lives breathe, where women sit with pens and old bills and say, I didn't know I was allowed to understand this. And I tell them, you were always allowed. Second Ledger has grown. We now have chapters in 6 cities, hundreds of women, some rebuilding, some just beginning. One started a flower shop at 62, another paid off her debt and bought a camper. Every time one of them stands tall, I feel something inside me heal. Not just from Glenn, but from every silence I ever accepted.